Thank you and good morning. Welcome to this meeting of the Places and Resources Overview Committee of the 21st of November. Just a couple of reminders to start with. Firstly, when you speak, can you please give your name and the area you represent or organisation you represent when you ask questions and so forth. And yes, please make sure that you talk into the microphone. Otherwise, anyone who is trying to follow this online often can't hear us properly. So thank you all very much for that. On then to item 1, apologies.
We've had no apologies today.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure if you can hear me. Councillor Sherry Jesperson, I'm online.
Yes.
Can I give semi-apologies for Councillor Simon Gibson, who's on his way, but is stuck in, obviously travelling very slowly in the snow, but he is hoping to be at the meeting.
Okay, thank you very much for letting us know that. We have sent out an email to everybody who's not here to say that they are welcome to join us online if they want to do so. On then to item 2, the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of September. Is everybody happy that they are a true and correct record? Yes, thank you very much. Item 3, any declarations of interest? No. Chair's update, I don't have anything particular to update you with today. Item 5, questions. Neither of the people asking the questions are here, so they will be dealt with as from a written basis, and they will be sent a written answer based on the information that's been provided. Okay. Item 6, questions from councillors. Have we received any?
No questions from councillors.
Okay, then on to item 7, a presentation by Chris Peck to do with our active travel policy. So over to you.
There we go, that's better, sorry. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to present some slides, if that's all right. This item is about the active travel infrastructure plan for Dorset, which is an overall plan for how we're going to provide for walking, wheeling and cycling. So in summary, I'll just go through what it is that we have been working on, why we're doing it, the public engagement work that we've done so far, the network plans that we have proposed, and also, critically, the prioritisation criteria for developing any further work from those network plans, and finally, the sort of next steps in this process. So firstly, what is an active travel infrastructure plan? This is something that's a structure that's been agreed with the Department for Transport, has come from Department for Transport guidance on how to produce these. And what it is a long-term strategy for improvements to routes for walking, wheeling and cycling. In this case, wheeling means using a wheelchair, mobility scooter or other type of mobility aid. So it's very much about trying to make sure that we're being as inclusive as possible. The outputs of this are network plans, which are there to link neighbourhoods to key destinations such as schools, town centres, leisure destinations and employment areas. And then finally, we prioritise elements of those routes, identifying where we're going to generate the biggest benefits. And I'll go on to explain a bit more about that further down the line. So secondly, why do we need a plan? Why are we doing this? We want to understand residents' priorities for where they want to see improvements made. We also want to ensure that we have a plan to access future funding, particularly from Active Travel England, which in the last few years has provided around £3 million of capital and £600,000 of revenue funding for the authority to do improvements. And there's an example of some of the funding supported things like the the changes to Custom House Quay in Weymouth. That contributed to that scheme, and there are various other ones which are ongoing as well. So ensuring that we have an initial plan for how we obtain future funding from central government is a very important part of this. But also it's identifying the improvements which would be required to ensure that future developments go ahead and are in a sustainable location with good access to walking and cycling networks. I probably don't need to reiterate these issues, but the benefits of increasing active travel are manifold. So you've got improvements to air quality and climate change. We have improvements to access to employment and access to education for improving skills. There's obviously health and well-being, which is a major part of this, given the low levels of physical activity in this country and in Dorset. It's about travel choice, about giving people more options. On a day like today, I suppose it's quite critical, given that so many of our members are stuck, unable to get here because of the lack of public transport options and requiring cars, and those cars now being stuck in the snow. And then finally, I suppose there's also congestion, and I'll come on to discuss that in more detail shortly about the number of short car journeys that could be shifted to active travel in some locations. But on public health, we know that being more physically active has huge benefits to a range of health outcomes, lots and lots of cancer and benefits to musculoskeletal conditions, and overall reduced mortality risk of between 20 and 35%. So huge benefits, and still a high proportion of the population are not obtaining the sufficient levels of physical activity. And embedding physical activity into everyday life through enabling people to walk, cycle or wheel in their local area can help resolve some of these issues. So the development of the Active Travel Infrastructure Plan, ATIP process, follows this six-stage process as set out by the Department of Transport.
Well done.
That is, in terms of stage one, is determining the scope of the exercise. Then you go through a phase of gathering information, preparing network plans for the areas you've identified. Finally, there's prioritizing those, and then the adoption of the work. So in terms of the scope of the plan, what we have been working on is two principal urban areas in East Dorset and South Dorset, which together around 200,000 people within Dorset Council areas, so that's over half of the population. In addition to that, we've looked at 5 other kind of key market towns and the hinterland around them, and they're, or in some cases, a few market towns collected together. And they're illustrated on this map, which shows the scope of the exercise. So that's 15 town centre areas in Dorset, and this covers about 85% of the population, about 90% of the sort of school children would be covered by these plans. But I'm aware that it doesn't cover the rural areas in between that, which are often a long way from kind of key destinations. So when we go through the kind of gathering the information to back this up, there are a few critical bits of information. I won't go into all of them here for the sake of time, but one element that we do want to focus on is the fact that we need to acknowledge that in a lot of our towns, we've got a high proportion of the population who are living without access to a vehicle. This is from the 2021 census. There are parts of Dorchester where we've got 50 to 60% of households without access to a vehicle. And across the whole of Dorchester, there's over 2,000 households without access to a vehicle. And in Weymouth, it's around 5,400, 1,000 in Portland. These are around 20 to 25% of all households don't have access to a vehicle. Even in East Dorset, which is a slightly different demographic, but you still have 1,000 households in Ferndown, 750 in Wimborne, and 400 or so in Westmoors, and very concentrated in the town centre areas. These are people who are dependent on public transport, which means you have to walk to the bus stop, or they're using foot or mobility scooter or bike to get around their local area. Ensuring we have a safe environment for them to do so would enable them to live more independent lives, to access services without requiring additional support. Another aspect of this are short car journeys. This is a kind of slightly crazy spaghetti-looking image, but what it shows is the short car commutes patterns, where bluer ones tend to have a higher proportion of active travel, redder ones are a higher proportion of car commuting. And from this, we can identify where the highest propensity to increase active travel would come from. This is a diagram of the Weymouth area. We've prepared this for all parts of Dorset. But we know from this that we have around 25% of the trips going into the centre of Weymouth over the kind of Boot Hill A355 corridor are under 2.5 kilometres in length. And about half of those trips made by car are under 5 kilometres in length. These are trips that could be made on foot or by bike if we had really good, safe conditions for walking and cycling. If we shift some of those trips, then that's reducing levels of congestion, improving safety, improving the quality of the environment in the town centre. That's an example from Weymouth. As I say, there are other examples from elsewhere. So that's the sort of level of information we gather. We also gather information on deprivation, on school data and so on, which I won't go into now, but is in the emerging plan. We've also done public engagement as part of this process. This was done at the beginning of this year. We had 1,000 responses from across Dorset. They submitted 1,000 barriers to active travel, which I'll go into more detail, and over 400 routes. Many of the respondents came from the west of Dorset, particularly Bridport, Dorchester, and around the Dorchester area. And we had fewer in the east of the county and the north of the county, but overall a reasonably good response rate. So the key issues that we asked about and we got responses to were what the barriers were to walking, wheeling and cycling for people, where those barriers were. We asked for people's views on the proposed networks in the east and south that we'd already worked on, and we also asked people to submit routes for parts of Dorset that we didn't produce plans for, but have subsequently based on the outputs from that consultation or that public engagement exercise. So in terms of where the barriers that people identified, so this is an image of Dorchester where people could put on a map where they found difficulty walking, cycling or wheeling and give a little description of them. We looked at where those corresponded with the initial network plan we'd already identified, and we then clustered them where we had more than one person submitting a problem in a certain area. We really focused down on those issues. And what we found from that was that, we found that there were problems on many of the major junctions in Dorchester, but also outside as well, including links out to some of the villages. I won't go into the detail, but again, it's all in the appendices to the report. But really critical issues that we know have been long-standing problems with how to get through junctions, and where we have either schemes that are in design or are funded and are progressing, such as the Mornbury Junction in the centre of Dorchester, which is starting work fairly soon, which will be improving that for pedestrians particularly. There's a lot of ideas from this which we already know about, but there are also some very good information on what people's priorities are locally. Here's a similar map for the Weymouth area. Again, lots and lots of locations identified, lots of locations in the town centre, and many major junctions which people find difficult. We also, as I say, asked for people to submit routes that they wanted us to look at in more detail. In some cases, these corresponded to the existing proposed network, and in some cases, we've looked again at that network and added to it. Again, this is a map of the Dorchester area. We had a lot of routes submitted. As I said, we had 400. So going through that and identifying which ones we should be looking at in more detail was a bit of an exercise. The approach we took on that is we said, well, if they're over a certain distance or over sort of 10 kilometres, then that's really too far to be part of a priority network. This is about active travel. It's not specifically about recreational movement by walking or cycling. So it's about linking people from where they live to where they want to get to. And that is more about those shorter distance journeys. So up to around 7.5 kilometres really is the priority. So you'll see a lot of red lines there. That's suggestions people had for us to look at Dorchester to Blandford. But that's quite a long way for people to expect to walk or cycle, whereas actually what we want to focus on is the links from the villages into the town centre, but also getting through the town or getting through our town centres. I'm focusing on Dorchester a lot because I know that the chair is from Dorchester and there's quite a lot of people in the room from Dorchester, but there are plans for each of the areas that we've looked at, again, in the appendices. So from this, we can look at the walking route, the prioritised walking route. This is the town centre, and all the different coloured blobs there are different trip attractors. So schools, employment areas, the town centre, railway station, and you can see how the network is designed to try and ensure that we are enabling people to access the places they're trying to get to. That's principally the walking route, and the walking route considers the town centre and up to 2 kilometres away from the edge of the town centre. There's also the overall network, which includes routes, for instance, for cycling, which is a much bigger scale. This map also has on it the prospective development sites that have been from the emerging local plan and previous local plans. And that's another critical element, as I say before, is really identifying what improvements are required to ensure that those new developments are adequately connected to the network to ensure that those developments are sustainable. And then a similar version of that for the Weymouth area, where we had many fewer routes submitted, but lots and lots of barriers submitted there. And then there's the Weymouth Town Centre network and the Weymouth area-wide network. So yeah, all those sort of lighter green blobs are the kind of the trip attractors, the schools, the employment areas, and so on. Again, I don't want to dwell too much on this for the sake of time, but this is the area for East Dorset that we had submitted. So that's a very high-level map, but you can see there's Wimborne and Coal Hill, Westmoors, Ferndown, and Verwood to the north. And then there's the kind of the same map with the identified priority trip generators for it. So the other stage now, once we have a developed network, and we still have a lot of work, as I will say, to discuss with town councils and members on details for the proposed network in their areas, and we have some of those plans already. We've had those discussions. We will have further discussions with town councils, but it's the development of how we prioritise the routes from that. This is a very large network. It's around 700 kilometres of routes. It's an enormous network. We are not going to do a huge amount of work with that. We have no funding for this work. It is to enable us to bid for future funding, is the point of this process. But we also know that we need to ensure that we are putting in bids which have a very good business case behind them. And that's part of this, is working out the data which will enable us to submit a good case for these schemes. And so the prioritization criteria is critical. We've developed a sort of 8 criteria for which should be the ones we focus most attention on. I've listed these here. They are, as I say, how well it links to new housing or new development sites proposed in the local plan, the average deprivation of the area surrounding the route, the number of people who are potentially could be using this route to be cycling to work or cycling to school. Also the population living within 400 metres per kilometre of the route, number of jobs within 400 metres of the route per kilometre of the route, walking and cycling casualties per kilometre of the route, and the number of major destinations which are within 100 metres of the route. So that's those town centres, schools, and so on. And from this, we can identify where the highest priority routes, and it's not a surprise to when you look at somewhere like Dorchester, you see that the places which score highest are the places in the town centre, because they are closest to where people are trying to get to school, where they're trying to get to work, where there's a high proportion of people who could be using walking or cycling to get to destinations, and also where the highest number of casualties per kilometre can be found. Again, for the East Dorset area, a similar thing, that places in the centre of Ferndown and the centre of Wimborne score highest of all, whereas the kind of more remote rural links, which are very important to those communities, are going to be considered a lower priority under this process because they don't achieve quite as much in the way of outcomes. So that's a very quick run through of the process we've gone through, the steps we've taken. In terms of the next steps, as I say, we have some discussions still with members and with town councils and parish councils for the details of the plans in their areas. We then want to produce a final version of the plan to take either to Cabinet or for an executive decision, or potentially to come back to this committee if this committee would like to look at it in more detail. And then we would go through the stage of adopting it and publishing it. So hopefully that's a useful run through the process. I'm happy to go back and look at any particular plans, but since it's such a large network, I didn't want to kind of dwell too much on the details of area by area.
Right, thank you very much. I think that's a very thorough presentation report. I presume you're meeting with Dorchester Town Council, the community lunch, I think. We've had a notification about that. So that's part of a programme across the county, is it? As you focus so much on Dorchester, I just want to say, how many town councils are you actually in close contact with?
Yes, we met with various groups within Dorchester and plan to meet with town councils as and when required. We have a meeting with Bridport Town Council next week. So it's really as we'll be reaching out to the town councils, but also welcome any discussions with individual members or with town councils as appropriate.
Yeah, I think it's very, very important. Part of the way the new council wants to operate is to be far more inclusive of organisations across the whole of the Dorset Council area. So we really appreciate giving as much as possible to involved. The structure we have this debate. Firstly, I'd like to say this is really about a high-level discussion. So we don't really want to talk about individual proposals, individual sites. Okay, so we're looking at the policy as a whole. Firstly, we're inviting people who aren't members of the committee to have any questions, but I'm not aware there are any, are there?
We've got some Please.
Yeah, okay. So if there are any councillors, Neil, if you want to ask a question, now would be the time to do so.
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Neil Isink, Councillor Neil Isink, Egerton Ward. I just had a general question really about the approach in relation to some of the more semi-rural areas where there are satellite villages. And I had a concern that perhaps some low-hanging fruit had been missed in relation to looking at some of these areas. Egerton Ward has a number of medium-sized villages that are very close to larger towns, and I noted in the report that DT6 was one of the largest response rates from the general public, and DT6 actually encompasses a good number of these villages that I'm referring to. So just to kind of give an example, I know we're not talking about specifics, but for instance, Waytown and Wooth, Loaders, Melplash, all within fairly short distances of either Beminster or Bridport, all with quite narrow country lanes with very limited opportunities for cycling. And therefore, these people, some of these routes have been shown in the report as being recreational routes, but actually I think there's quite a good amount of opportunity for making them, commutable routes and things like that. So I just wondered if the report preparer had a view on whether they've missed some of the low-hanging fruit in relation to encouraging more active travel. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so I didn't share the Bridport plan in this presentation, but it is the sort of proposed plan is in the appendix. It does go out to loaders and it connects up to the proposed West Dorset Trailway, which links all the way to Maiden Newton. So that does encompass some of it, and obviously the National Cycle Network already follows some of the routes in your ward. But we can certainly to look at all the areas that you've identified, and it also goes north towards Netherbury as well, the network. But I should caveat that with the last point I raised around the prioritisation, which is that achieving a change in a rural environment like that is quite expensive and very difficult to justify compared to a more urban network. But yes, there are huge opportunities for recreational improvements in those parts of the countryside. The other aspect of this is that I know that the rights of way improvement plan is still in process of being redeveloped, and there's obviously a council plan commitment to improve 300 miles of the rights of way network. And I think in many places in rural areas, the bridleway and footpath network improvements to that will be very useful to residents, whereas trying to connect people from a very outlying village into Bridport might be very difficult to achieve or not have that much of a result in terms of shifting journeys. But what residents in those villages would really welcome would be improvements to their local rights of way network.
Councillor Ising, does that answer your point?
It does. Thank you to a certain extent, although I think I'd certainly take on board, in terms of bang for buck and investment and the challenge of linking up satellite villages that are a long way out. But I suppose I would welcome the opportunity to chat with the officer a bit more about whether there are certain places that have been missed, because I'm specifically thinking of places that are literally less than a kilometre from either Bridport or Beminster, and actually I think where there are school routes that currently people are driving less than a kilometre to drop their children to school because of high hedges and narrow lanes. So I would welcome the chance of chatting with the officer a bit more about whether certain things might not be worth considering a bit further. But thank you very much for the answer.
Thank you. If I could just come back one point of that. In the report, I do mention that one of the potential benefits to doing this process is that we could identify, and we are in the process of trying to identify, exactly those sort of locations where school children are receiving school transport, often at considerable cost to the authority, for having to make very short journeys, which they, at the moment, they can't do because the road is unsafe there. And there's the potential, therefore, to also enable pupils to walk or cycle to school, which is obviously good for them and often things that those pupils want to be doing, whilst also saving the authority money. But that project is very early stage, but very happy to talk to you in more detail.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Brinton next.
Oh, me. I would like to bring back it similar to what Councillor Ising said. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we can. You're quite faint, but so if you could speak a bit louder.
I'll try and speak clearly. I'd just like to point out a very easy or a difficult but easy site, which is that it feels very much as though this report, yes, it does centre around Dorchester and Wareham and places like that, but it's missed out a very important village in my area, which is Lychett Matravers, which is only it's less than 3 miles from Lychett Matravers to Lychett Minster School, where about 200 children a day are taken in by their parents in cars. Now, I've raised this before and been told that the main route that children do often cycle actually is classed as an unsafe route to school. Fair enough, it is unsafe. It could have improvements. But we're told that the route that the children should use is a converted bridleway cycle path, which is fine as a leisure route, but it isn't really suitable, and it's certainly not acceptable to parents as a route to school for cyclists, because it's dark, it goes through muddy, overhung branches, basically farm track. But Litchett Matravers is only 3 miles away from the whole pool network. Most people in Litchett Matravers commute to Poole. If they could commute on bikes or electric bikes, then it would be much more efficient and sustainable in the long run. And it's just that there doesn't seem to be any mention of it. Now, I know it's going to be expensive, but we really do have to put some effort into thinking about it. That was my point. And looking forward, if you're talking about future use, in the plan, I mean, at the moment, there's 130 houses planned for that village, and that's coming on, shortly. And I think in the Dorset local plan, originally it was going to be 400 houses. That's not finalised, obviously. But we've got a major commuting route where we are effectively making people drive, and it doesn't have to be that way. So I would like to see more mention of working with the Rights of Way team to upgrade in that sort of rural fringe. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Brenton. I mean, we've had a lot of discussion about this particular route. There's a lot of ongoing discussions internally about exactly those issues. I would say that in Appendix 1 that comes with my report, on page 23, it has the map of the Purbeck area, and the route to Litchett Matravers using the bridleway is included there, and we do acknowledge that as a kind of critical route that we want to try and improve. So absolutely acknowledge the importance of it, but as I say, we've had a lot of offline discussions about this, and very happy to continue those.
Thank you. Just a reminder, can we please concentrate on the overall policy, not individual routes? Because we'll be here all day and all night if we just do every single route in detail. It doesn't really work that way. Councillor Mike Parks next.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Mike Parks, Ferndown North. First of all, my apologies. I got as far as Beer Regis this morning and had to turn around. The roads were less than passable. So thankfully I'm here online.
Sure.
I'm not going to go into...
I think several people are probably in a similar position. So, but thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Again, I'm going to try and avoid specifics, but having been through 5 years of pain with the Transforming Cities works that have been carrying on for those 5 years in Ferndown, I'd just like to say we don't want this done to us, which was, unfortunately, the TCF money was agreed by the former Dorset County Council prior to 2019, and we basically had no choice in what was done. It's been hugely unpopular over the last 5 years, the disruption and upheaval, which continues. The last phase is currently being done, is extremely unpopular with residents. The outcomes have been positive, and we've got some fantastic cycle routes through Ferndown which have been worth the pain, and we've seen improved road junctions, crossings and things like that. So there are some tangible benefits, but it was done to us, and my concern is there were elements that were withdrawn from the TCF project, both in Ferndown and in other areas, that these will come back onto the table when they clearly weren't necessary, and I don't want to see this enforced back on us or other areas of Dorset where things were shelved for good reasons.
Thank you, Councillor Parks. I suppose I can't speak exactly for the TCF Transforming Cities Fund programme and elements of it, but yes, the point of producing this plan is very much to understand where people's priorities are, and to work at an early stage with communities to build a local understanding of exactly the highest priority locations, and also to set out the data for why a location should be a higher priority than another in terms of the benefits we will get as a society, and hopefully there to understand and be able to communicate to people when as you say, the pain of the traffic management is happening, that these are the people who will benefit. So in the case of Ferndown, for instance, we should be saying that there are 1,000 households in Ferndown who do not have access to a car. These are the people who will benefit from better crossings and a wider, smoother footway there to be able to use your mobility scooter on. So there is a kind of communications element when those schemes are going ahead. But I understand that when you've got a lot of roadworks in your area, it can be quite painful to manage as a local member. So as I said, this is very much trying to set the understanding for each area of what the priorities are.
Did you want to come back on that?
No, I just really wanted to reiterate the fact that it's not so much. I get the pain that the traffic management causes, which has been unbearable at times, but it was more that this was done to us, and I fear that another travel plan will do the same to us, where priorities could be spent elsewhere. East Dorset as a whole, Ferndown, Wimborne, West Parley have been through their fair share of pain for stuff that's not popular with residents. I would hate to see more money being invested into an area where it's clearly not needed.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I suppose the point was you were saying that there is no set of funding allocated to this project. That's correct. This is the basis to take up for bids in the future and that sort of thing. I mean, I presume it would seem logical, someone who doesn't know the area we talk about at all, but for officers to spend a lot of time on a project that's controversial in one area would seem to be difficult if there was a similar area somewhere else in the county where people really wanted it there, and so it should be. We need to take into account the local members' views, and if there are community resistance in certain areas, maybe we shouldn't be doing the things there, but looking somewhere else for it.
Yes, I mean, what you're talking about, I suppose, is very much a broad strategic view of where to prioritise all future projects. I think one element is that there has been funding available for these schemes from central government, and that has been targeted in certain areas. And I totally understand that there might be a feeling that it happened very quickly and with a limited amount of public engagement. One point I would say about that is all that happened during COVID. So I think that was quite a difficult period for trying to engage communities. There was no opportunity to have drop-in events. There was a limited opportunity to do really detailed engagement with local communities. And I think in future, we would, and this is very much part of this process, we would like to have a better understanding and a bit more of a dialogue running up to any strategic projects.
Good, thank you. That sounds really reassuring. Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Sherry Jesperson next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sherry Jesperson, Hillfoot and Upper Clarence Ward. And I'm sorry I'm not with you this morning. I got as far as Blandford and then had to turn round. First of all, thank you for this report. It makes interesting reading. First of all, can I just absolutely support, but I won't repeat it, support what's been said already about the coverage of the rural, the village areas and the larger villages and so on. I absolutely get the fact that you get less return on your investment per head in those areas, but they are nonetheless absolutely critical, and they are taking increasing amounts of traffic for a whole range of reasons, and so it is very, and there's around the north there's virtually no public transport, so we must do everything we can not to make these areas even more deprived of good access by not including them. But I appreciate that in this case that they're not a priority, and I understand why. Just on the subject of that, and it's a bit of a digression, but it's my only chance to say it. Can we also put into this plan somewhere something that encourages parents dropping off their children to school to find other means of going in their car? Because now it seems to me that in all of my villages, every single parent goes to school, even if they're going to the school in that village. They seem to find it absolutely normal to go by car, and it would be just nice if we could have some publicity to remind parents that actually it's better for themselves and their children if they could not go by car, if they could walk to the school. But I just leave that thought with you. In terms of the couple of comments specifically, is you mention in your report, in the report, that you're taking into account new housing developments that are in the local plan. Just to be clear, of course, our local plans are very, very out of date, and a very significant amount of the new housing developments that we're having, particularly in the larger villages, are actually not in the local plan. They are development that is off plan, but some of this development is very big. I'm thinking of villages, and like Pimper, you've included, but villages like Marnell and Strawbridge and so on, where they've had a lot of development. So please don't only look at the local plan to find out where the new development is going to be. Talk to the planning department, because there's lots of significant development that's not plan-led that is coming our way. And the second point I'd just like to make is, I appreciate that you're not including, given that what you've said about the really, really important point in our health and well-being, that getting more, becoming more active has, I mean, it's a massively important part of this whole debate for residents, and also, of course, for the cost to the council and to the NHS down the line with this kind of ill health. It's disappointing that the rural areas are not covered in terms of leisure activity, because leisure activity, given that 62% of our population is over the age of 60 or 65, and therefore broadly likely to be retired. So while these people are very busy volunteering, they're not commuting to work. So leisure activity is a really important part of of the travel that they're doing. So it's disappointing that leisure activity is not included in any of this. Was that because the Department of Transport specified that, or was that a decision that we took when we formulated this plan? Thank you.
Thank you. So your 2 points. I'll talk first of all about the local plan issue, and you're right that some of the sites which are from the historic local plans are now out of date, and you're right that there's a lot of other schemes which have come forward off plan because of the requirements of the 5-year housing land supply and so on. But we can't work out where those sites will be because they are by their nature speculative. So we have to rely on the information we have available. We do talk very closely with the planners about what improvements can be made to those sites. But quite often those sites are in inappropriate locations without good access to services. If they were in those locations, they might more likely to be allocated sites. So it is a bit of a problem that we we don't have an easy solution to. And quite often, if it's quite a small development, say 100, 150 homes, that's not going to provide the level of Section 106 or SIL gain, which will enable us to adequately link it to all the locations that those residents might be trying to get to. But therefore we're trying to work our best with the planned or allocated sites as we have them. But yeah, I definitely take that view. With regards to leisure activities, one of the trip generators we identified was key leisure sites, but what we're talking about is routes to them and access to them rather than, as you say, leisure trips for itself. And I acknowledge that for a lot of people, particularly in somewhere like Dorset, where you're right, we have a higher than an average proportion of retired people, leisure trips will be a high proportion of the trips they make. But whereas trips for work or for school, you have to have a destination you're going to. Those other trips, they are, as it were, voluntary or elective, and people can decide where they want to make them and when they want to go. So it is slightly harder to plan for that. We do in the plan and include some of the key recreational routes where they are also have a benefit to active travel as well. So, for instance, near your area, we've got the North Dorset Trailway all the way up to between Blandford and Stern Newton, and also south of Blandford, and including some of the links that come off to some of the villages there. But again, yes, you're right that part of it is that the Department for Transport is particularly interested in the opportunities to shift some of those car journeys around schools, around workplaces, and I would say again that it's the rights of way improvement plan and the commitment to upgrade 300 miles of rights of way, which will probably achieve more to improve access to green spaces and improve leisure opportunities for some of the more rural areas of the authority. And we would like to work to identify some of the highest priority routes that could also provide access to schools and trip destinations, which are also part of the rights of way network. But yeah, it sort of means that if you're living in a village, you can decide when to go out for a bike ride or for a walk, whereas in a town, if you're trying to get to a secondary school or a primary school, that is determined by a certain time, and that's often the busiest time of the day, and that's the sort of trips that we want to try and prioritise safety for and prioritise access. So I hope that answers your questions in part, at least.
Are you happy with that?
Yeah. Yes, I am. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yes.
Councillor Richard Crabb next.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Richard Crabb of Sherborne West. I've got a couple of questions. In one part of the ward, we have a lot of children crossing a very busy main road. So the question really is about funding crossings from this policy as to whether that's part of it or not. The other question is about the map shown in the document. I was looking at it and it just looks like there are lines drawn across. Does that indicate that there's more work to be done in thinking through the detail, or is that just, if you like, a principle? Also, I'd just like to apologise for being late. Again, I wasn't able to get in. I had to turn round and come back home. Thank you.
Well, thank you for making the effort. It is always appreciated when people go the extra distance when circumstances may be very difficult otherwise. Do you want to comment on that?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for your questions. So the map you're referring to is on page 28 of Appendix 1. So yeah, the lines there are the routes submitted by members of the public, and on top of that, there's the network that we've identified based on submissions from both members of the public and where we've had submissions from parish councils or town councils, or in the case of Sherborne, the Sherborne Transport Action Group, who submitted their own response as well. So that map shows the sort of the wider scale network, including links to the outlying villages, but also the links within the town. In terms of the kind of the crossing issues, I know that there are some crossings proposed, Horse Castles and so on, or Horse Castles Lane, which is probably the one you're referring to, and that is done in a slightly different way in that we receive proposals from crossings from town councils, and then that goes through a process of surveying the routes, identifying whether it's possible to put in a crossing, and if it meets a certain threshold, then we will look to see how we can to improve that. Again, that will be based on identifying the number of users that there are at the moment and the number of potential users, the speed of traffic and the volume of traffic. And that is really a way of just trying to, again, make sure that we are investing in those crossings where there's the greatest need. That's certainly that. I know that there is work going on at that Horse Castles crossing. It being in this plan will certainly help to provide us with a baseline of data in terms of knowing what the number of people affected by it, where the schools are, and so on. And if it's on the plan, it will potentially help with progressing that crossing, particularly where we want to attract external funding. Generally, crossings are paid for from the integrated transport budget, which we get a small allocation from the Department for Transport to do those sorts of safety schemes. But also, again, if we can show that they are a critical part of a wider network, a wider walking or cycling or wheeling network in a town, then we might be able to also bid for external funding as well for it. So I hope that answers the question.
Does that answer your points?
Yes, I think that does. Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Andrews, the portfolio holder for this area.
Yeah, thank you very much. Once again, I too was held up and had to turn back on the same roads that Richard did. But I can quite assure you they were all gritted last night. I went out from midnight till 4:30 this morning on the gritter runs. So they've been done 5 times since 12:30 yesterday afternoon. Yeah, we've done what we could. Thank you very much, Chris. Unfortunately, I missed most of your presentation. I have read the report. The most important thing is that we still engage with parish and town councils to ensure that we've got all the information that's required. We'll take your views on board, the committee, and make sure that we look at them positively and see what we can do about incorporating them into policy. So I'd just like to say thank you very much for everybody for attending, those of you who could, those that couldn't, I'll leave it there. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Is there anyone else left online who hasn't said? No? Okay. In which case, Councillor Taylor, you had a question.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chris, for an excellent report. I must say it's nice to see that the progress in there. First of all, I'd say I am here in council today, and my trusty buggy did make it through the snow. And thank you very much for my colleague standing behind to make us quorum it. My question to you, Chris, is the fact it's like we've seen the outline of plans coming in and the way going forward with our plan, with our cycleways and byways being put in. Do we have a recognised work of plan through the period to see where we're going to achieve what we're going forward with? Because there's been a lot of communications. I'm not giving certain areas. I'm just saying there's certain areas around Dorchester, which we've been promised work. There have been delays, which we understand because of finances. It's just, I constantly get asked by residents to say, what's going on? And things that some of your plans are showing what we've got, but it's the question of works, where are we going forward to? Do we have that coming forward? Thank you.
Thank you. So what we are trying to set out here is essentially the short-term programme, which is where we have a funded programme in place of works. And then beyond that, the aspirational plan that we would want to achieve, should we be able to find funding for it. But I think the critical point that you raised there is there are severe funding constraints. Nearly all this work will have to be achieved through support from developer funding or through external funding, and that is getting harder to find. Not only is it getting harder to find, but the costs of delivering the schemes is increasing considerably. So we're in a sort of slightly a double bind there in terms of we can achieve less, and we're also having diminishing resources to achieve it. So I think part of this will have to be a degree of managing the expectations of what we can achieve, but what we don't want to do is say, well, we can't do anything. We want to make sure we're prioritising with what limited resources there are, the schemes which are going to have the greatest impact and will overcome the most barriers or the highest barriers to active travel in these areas. But yeah, I know that there's been quite a lot of work recently in and around Dorchester in terms of improving the access, particularly to the west of Dorchester, and we are about to embark on quite a lot of work on signals, particularly Maunbury Junction in Dorchester. So that's more of a pedestrian accessibility improvement, but really critical for people who are visually impaired and mobility impaired as well to get through that junction safely. So, those are really the critical areas that we need to resolve. I think it would be lovely to be able to build cycle routes into the countryside, but the resources are not there at the moment to achieve that. We need to focus on resolving the really critical safety and accessibility issues within the town.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I totally understand your constraints. I totally get it. And thing on that one there. The things that makes me concerned is the fact it's like we have preschools and beginner schools coming to the mainstream, coming to Dorchester of the secondary schools, for example, Chalmers, etc., Thomas Hardy. But then we've also got the problems with the main roads, the A37 and people like that. And we do have big problems, And our dream is to get the road from Bristol to Portland, the cycleways to actually join it completely, and that's what our dream is, and it is difficult. But do we have any possibilities of highways, and this is purely an open question here, of actually assisting you with your dream to get the cycleways for safety for the children, to commute to the schools, as adults to get to the towns, the relevant population areas?
I'd say that this plan is trying to identify where the barriers are. So if you take the example, I don't want to again get stuck into the details, but Chalmers to Dorchester, you'll see in the presentation and in the some of the outputs of it, we've identified where the problems are there. We've got one or two junctions which act as the barrier to movement through there. One of the issues raised there is obviously getting children from the new estate in Chalmers Farm to St Osmond's and to Thomas Hardy's. Well, if we don't get that in place, then we're just enabling more and more people to feel that driving their kids to school is the only way to do that. And some of those houses are actually outside the 3 mile limit as well, so they will be qualify for school transport, which is a considerable cost to the authority. So all these issues do come together, and we need to resolve them. But fixing some of those barriers is incredibly expensive, as you will know. So that's fantastic. It's a challenge.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
Councillor Tarr.
So I'd just like to thank Chris for the enormous amount of work he's done on this and his team. It really is a massive piece of work. People just think you sit in the office and have a cup of tea and write a few words, but it is a massive piece of work to consult so many people on so many locations right across the county of Dorset, which is pretty expansive in spite of its low population. I fully back up what all the councillors have said so far, particularly Councillor Jefferson. I think made some very clear points about how we feel in the countryside about these things. The major roads, of course, are largely run by DFT. So we've got national highways. The Active Travel England is also part of the Department for Transport. So I'm hoping that they can work together to get those national problems sorted out in parallel with our efforts to improve things in Dorset. I think it's vital that we get this report through, because that's where the money is, if you like. We need to get this report through with as few amendments as possible at this stage. It complies with the national guidelines. The money is available for projects that follow the national guidelines. And this county desperately needs central funding to carry on doing the things we do. And of course, we get less central funding, as we've found out over the last few weeks, from central government and most of our neighbours. So it's vital to get reports like this through so that we can actually start applying for the DOSH, basically. I think the only other point is that the maintenance has been a major problem over the last 5 years I've been a councillor. Parishes are complaining about the state of the cycleways which we already have because they're not being maintained properly. And I'm sure this is something we'll try and put right with the reorganisation that's taking place currently. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Tarr. Did you want to make any more comments? Or any final comments?
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to respond just on that around the kind of joint working. I know this is an issue that that many people in our team deal with, is the fact that quite a lot of the barriers do appear on the National Highways network rather than on the local network, and there are obviously particular issues in your ward that are an issue there. And I'd say, well, that's an ongoing process. Again, I think National Highways have got their own issues with how they're funding their schemes and the priority which they give elements of their network. We have to be aware that this part of the National Highways network in Dorset is not their highest priority, and so we have to make the case where we can for improvements to ensure there's safe access across it. But yeah, I think that's not something that's entirely in our control.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's been, yeah.
One thing I did miss out, I think there should be perhaps a paragraph in there about rural tourism, because our pubs, our small village cafes, village shops are suffering nationwide, but in Dorset particularly. And I think we need to just mention that we need to have regard for rural tourism in Dorset. We know that the Coast Path brings in millions of expenditure in local villages along the coast, and I'd like to see that happening with cycleways as it does in some of our neighbouring countries. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, I think there should be no problem with that. I want to thank everybody who's taken part in this debate. I think it's been a very, really good, deep process. I feel very much that everyone is very supportive of what you're trying to achieve and the way you're going about it. And I don't think... Sorry, go on. Oh, okay, go on. Councillor Bryan, you just... back to my conclusions, but by all means, if you have something to say, if you'd like to put the question.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Apologies, I've just had a power cut as well as covered in snow, so it's not very good over here in the east at the moment. One of the points I wanted to raise, and sorry if I've missed this somewhere, is as well as the capital issues that we deal with on this, we need to look at the ongoing revenue issues, because maintaining any of the active travel areas is quite costly. And at the moment, budgets are limited. So we need to take into account the ongoing cost of maintaining these. And I'm not just talking about repairing them, I'm talking about sweeping them, because obviously if they're covered in leaves, then people aren't going to use them. But also, I don't know whether it's part of this exercise, but I would ask that we maintain the pressure on government to make sure that if we're building cycleways, then the cyclists use them, because that is the biggest problem that we've had. Thank you for letting me speak, Chairman.
No problem. Did you want to add anything about that? I mean, I think we are all in agreement on that. We do want more funding, both from government and from other sources, and we work to achieve it. From what's been said, I don't see there's any reason for this to go to Cabinet particularly. I think this committee, fully back what you're doing and saying. Probably what we would like to see, I would suggest on this, it would be maybe a report back in a year's time or something about progress and how things are going. Does that sound reasonable? Maybe I'll also move to your team in terms of your work schedule. What would be most useful in supporting what you need?
Thank you, Chair. I think we'd be quite keen to progress it faster than that, but maybe it's something for us to talk to the portfolio of the Cabinet member about and identify a schedule for taking it forward. But yeah.
I'd just like to second that. I think we need to know roughly what's going to happen earlier than that if we're going to do a budget for next year and things like that. So I'd like to propose that we do that. We don't think we need to do anything now, do we? I think portfolio holder could decide it. If we...
The one thing I didn't see here was a schedule of time on this. So, if Councillor Andrews has that in mind, or if you do, I mean, that would be helpful. But I think we want to be supportive. We want to encourage you to complete the works.
Yeah. We'll I'll talk to Chris and we'll come up with a time schedule and keep you involved, Chairman.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. Really appreciated that. Very good. Thank you. Now we'll move on to item 8. Do I need to do a vote on that, or do I? No, that's fine. Yeah, okay. Right, on to item 8 on economic growth strategy. Yeah, okay. Nick, I'm going to go joining us online.
I am, Chair, yes. Hopefully you can hear me loud and clear.
Yeah.
Good stuff. What I'd like to do then is just share a presentation, if I may.
Yes, thank you.
Has that come through, Chair?
Yeah, we can see that.
Great, thank you.
You're quite quiet. I mean, I don't know if there's anything we can do to boost the sound. Yeah.
I'm trying to sort that now. Is that any better?
No, not really. I mean, we can hear you. You're quite faint.
Okay,
Have you got headphones?
Just bear with me 1 second.
Well, it probably doesn't help there's so few of us in here. It makes it much harder. Yeah.
Is that any better?
Hello, is that any better?
I believe if that is better for you than the online. So Helen behind me is a member of Nick's team and could drive the presentation and talk to it if you would prefer that to Nick being online. So apologies, Helen, I've just offered you up to take over.
Can members hear me?
I think we'll have to do that because I think we're all struggling to really hear what Nick's saying otherwise. Sorry, that's me.
Yes, that's fine. I was on standby for this. Thank you. I'm Helen Heens, Principal Economic Development Officer in Nick Webster's team, the Growth and Economic Regeneration team. So, I thought originally Nick was going to introduce the report, but we'll go straight on with the presentation. Obviously, the Council's vision in the new draft plan is working together to create a fairer, more prosperous and more sustainable Dorset for current and future generations. And one of the priorities is growing our economy. So the economic growth strategy plays an important part in meeting those objectives. Whilst we've been working on the background information and the base case and the baselines for the economic growth strategy, we've come across a number of significant issues, economic issues that affect Dorset Council area. And this has been through looking through statistics, looking at reports, and also meeting with businesses and getting direct feedback from businesses. Unemployment is not really a problem in Dorset. We've got quite high employment. We have 145,000 jobs across 20,000 businesses. However, there is a lot of underemployment, so low productivity and low employment levels, and sometimes multiple part-time working. That said, we have some really good, strong sectors. Advanced engineering and manufacturing is one of the best sectors in Dorset. It's also quite hidden because it specialises a lot in defence and marine sectors which aren't that visible because of the type of contracts the companies are working on, as they're often tier 2 companies working for defence contractors. All the businesses that we've spoken to and all the sectors that we have in Dorset all seem to be facing significant skill shortages and recruitment shortages. So that is a real issue. These are kind of the key headline facts to take away before we go into more details. Tourism and agriculture and care as well are quite high profile in Dorset. They have a lot of people employed with them, but they also tend to be quite low paid and low skilled jobs, which we'll show you later. The ageing population is an issue not just for the economy, for other parts of the council, but it compounds the skill shortages and affects some of the housing difficulties that we've got. And all the businesses are reporting problems with housing in terms of recruiting staff, with their skill shortages. And it's not so much affordable housing, but making housing affordable. So it's the affordability of housing for all levels, really. Next slide, please. Nick. Yep. So based on the evidence base, we've brought this down to 4 key areas. Productivity, so addressing the productivity gap in Dorset against the national average. Skills, as I've mentioned, housing affordability and retention of young people. Tied in with productivity is also employment land and the availability of employment land. I'll go into these in a bit more detail in the next few slides. Next slide, please, Nick. Productivity. Over the last 25 years, productivity in Dorset has kind of flatlined. There's only been 6% growth in the Dorset Council area, compared with 31% in the combined in the BCP area. So combined, it was about 25%. But yeah, Dorset has had very limited growth in productivity over quite a considerable period. This also reflects Southwest growth of 35% and UK growth of 43%. So our growth levels are very, very poor, not just on a local basis, but on a regional and national basis. And nationally, the UK's productivity levels are some of the lowest in all of the G7, the bigger economic countries as well. So that's one of the key areas that Dorset needs to address if it's going to move its economy forward and create value. If anyone doesn't know, GVA, gross value added, is the additional value that is added on to products and services by businesses in Dorset through production. Next slide, please. Part of the issues facing Dorset, which I think a lot of people are aware of, is our population. This is the hourglass for Dorset's population. So the hourglass, that's the shape it's taken. Not all population maps take that shape. On the left is male, on the right is female. The blocks are the position, the current position, as of 2019. The orange line is what it was in 2009, and the black line is the predictions for 2029. So as you can see from that, the middle age, so from about 20 to about 45, has shrunk and is continuing to shrink in terms of population. So people are going to school here, and even that is falling. They're then moving away and not coming back until close to retirement age or into retirement age, and that retirement figure is due to expand further. But that constriction on the lower age range feeds through to constrictions in the labour force and skills shortages. Often I will show this slide with one for the UK next to it, and for the UK, the bulge is in the middle years where the working age population is, which for us is where it's constricted. So the availability of skilled labour and actually attracting and retaining young people in Dorset is quite key. Next slide, please. This slide is called What's the Skills Equilibrium. It shows where we are in terms of demand for skills and supply of skills, supply being horizontal. It was taken from reports that was done for the Great Southwest, looking at the evidence base across the Great Southwest. For Dorset and BCP area, we have a high demand for skills, but a low supply of skills, which kind of reflects what we're saying about there's a skill shortage across most areas in Dorset and most sectors in Dorset. Where we'd like to be is where Exeter is, where there is a high supply and a high demand. In comparison with Dorset, Exeter has a university, had good connectivity, it has a motorway, it has railways, it has plenty of employment land, so it has really good conditions for growth. We've got the demand for the growth, but we haven't got the supply of the skills. Where we don't want to be is the likes of Torbay and the Western Northern Peninsula, where there is both low demand and low supply, so it's there's no ambitions to growth, whereas for Dorset there are ambitions for growth from our businesses. Next slide, please. This slide and the next one show the makeup of Dorset's economy by jobs and sectors. In Dorset, we have a lot of low-paid jobs, is generally the situation that we see. So the red is for instance, accommodation and food service, that's tourism. The median weekly pay there is £229, and we have nearly 12% of our employees in that area. 19,000 employees are in accommodation and food service. If you look at some of the higher ones, mining and quarrying, we've only got 100 in there, even though we have mines and quarries, but they're now a lot more automated. And that gets £662 a week. We only have a very small amount in that area. The same with water supply and electricity and gas and some of those kind of higher paid jobs. We have a very low amount of employment in there, our high employment areas. Manufacturing is one of the better ones, that is kind of medium pay, but agriculture is quite high, £420 a week. Arts entertainment, £305 a week. Other service activities, £369. So we have a lot of people employed in lower paid jobs, and it would be nicer to actually have more higher paid jobs, more skilled jobs, which would then help with the housing situation. Next slide, please. This is the same slide as the previous one, but with it plotted on a graph to see which shows the correlation slightly clearer, that we have a negative correlation between wages and employment numbers. Ideally, we need the graph effectively going the other way as a positive gradient, so that as the more jobs we've got are in higher paid areas as opposed to the more jobs being in the low paid areas. And obviously low paid jobs affects housing affordability and the general position in Dorset. Next slide, please. Okay. This is another slide that was taken from the Great Southwest evidence base. In spite of what we've just said about our low pay in Dorset, or I've just been saying about the low pay in Dorset and the types of jobs we've got, this shows actually earnings by both residents, which is people living in Dorset, and the place they work. Across the southwest, Dorset has the highest level of residence-based earnings, and reasonably high in terms of workplace being obviously where the business is in Dorset. So this suggests that people are actually moving outside of Dorset, commuting out of Dorset to actually get better pay. you probably see vans going up to London or on the motorways leaving at the beginning of the week, coming back at the weekend. So it's people out commuting to London on a weekly basis, commuting into the BCP area and into Hampshire and Portsmouth, that type of area, to get better paid jobs. So and then bringing the incomes back here. So we're a little bit below the England average, and our workplace earnings are lower than our residence-based earnings. We do relatively well for this, compared with the Southwest, but the Southwest as a whole has low levels of earnings. Next slide, please. And the earnings levels then reflects through to housing affordability. It hasn't quite formatted properly. In spite of our earnings, we have very poor housing affordability in the Dorset Council area. In England, for medium house prices, it is income to housing ratio of 8.2 times. For Dorset, it's 11.5 times income to house prices. So our medium house price is 350,000 compared with England of 290,000. And for lower quartile pricing, again, we have very high levels compared with both England and the Southwest. That's lower quartile is the lower quarter of house prices compared to the lower quarter of incomes. And then it's, again, nearly 11 over 10 times for Dorset Council. So affordability of housing is a real issue for residents in Dorset and for people looking to get onto the housing register or looking to take jobs in Dorset. They can get an income, but even if they get a reasonable income, they struggle to be able to afford housing in Dorset, be that to rent or to buy or shared ownership. Next slide, please. Right, so that's been a quick run through the kind of evidence base that we've been working on and building on for the economic growth strategy. We're now into the kind of the formalisation of this, and we're at the start of that process. And what we're now looking to do is we're looking to identify and to address some of those core structural issues in the local economy. So we've picked it out as skills, productivity, retention of young people, and housing. And we're tied up with retention of young people is kind of like social mobility are tied in with those things as well. In the strategy, we need to identify what are the major opportunities where Dorset can play to its strengths and where it can be a key part in the national economy, so that it can show to government that we have an offer that it can invest in, and that Dorset can play a key role. At the same time, at the current time, the Dorset Local Enterprise Partnership is coming to an end as of March. So Dorset Council will be taking on some more of the strategic economic functions than it has done in the past. And it gives us a chance to promote what is right for Dorset as opposed to being joined up with the BCP area. Obviously recognising there are, in the east of the county around Ferndown, there is quite a strong connectivity, but for the west, that the influence can be more towards Exeter, for instance, but it's what is right for Dorset, so defence, manufacturing, tourism, aquaculture, those kind of things. We want to look at the opportunities to build better links with higher education, with universities and colleges, and to make sure that the skills that businesses need now and in the future are reflected through to the universities. And it also then gives the opportunity for spin-outs from university, which brings the technology and also the advanced engineering production into Dorset. And we're looking to make quality places that people want to live in, want to visit, and want to have local communities in, and which attract and retain young people in Dorset. And they should be distinctive about Dorset. Next slide, please. The previous economic growth strategies seemed to be on a very broad church. It covered a lot of different areas of economic activity, from land to skills to digital connectivity to highways. But it did mean that you could say a lot of things worked. I think it was meant to be approached for the whole of the council. for this time, we're trying to prioritise more the areas that will make a real big difference to Dorset. What are the structural problems in Dorset's economy? How can we target these and how can we make a real difference for Dorset's economy and make Dorset grow? As you saw from the GVA figures, it's been flatlining for the last few years. That's not growth. We need to make a big difference here. So the approach we're doing needs buy-in from business sectors and business support organisations, and we'll be going out to engagement shortly. Next slide, please. So after speaking to the consultation team, we're actually going through a business and partner engagement, not consultation. Consultation has various legal ramifications, so we've got some engagement sessions coming up. We're partnering with Dorset Chamber, who are going to be working with local chambers, business improvement districts, town councils, to host a number of geographic focus group meetings with businesses across the county, on a geographic basis across the county, to get their feedback on what they think is right for Dorset, whether we've got identified the right issues, whether there's anything else that we're missing. And we're also looking at some events with perhaps the the Youth Council to get the young people's views, and sector groups as well, to get the views across the businesses in Dorset as to whether we've got the right issues, whether it's the approach that we're looking for. We're also going to do an online questionnaire on the council website so that you can get the views of other people that may not have been incorporated within those focus groups. And that actually is now going live 2nd of December and will be running through until the 17th of January for the questionnaire. Next slide, please. The members' task and finish groups. One of the things that we would like, which was mentioned at Cabinet, is for 4 members' task and finish groups to look at these priorities that we've picked out: skills, productivity, housing affordability, and retention of young people. Each task and finish group will effectively have like three or four meetings. Have we got this right? What could be done? Where can we move it to? What can be done? They'll be led by an officer with technical officer support from officers at Dorset Council, and the results from the task and finish groups will feed into the strategy development and influence the economic growth strategy. The task and finish groups are to have member proportional representation on a political basis. So if there's 8 members, it would be then 4 from the Lib Dems, 2 from the Conservatives, 1 from Green, 1 from Independents, and the leaders will be asked to nominate people to those task and finish groups shortly. Next slide, please. So there's the programme. We had to report to Cabinet on the 15th of October. Members' briefing was on the 16th of October. We're now at the extended leadership team. We did the extended leadership team. We're at Place Resources Committee. We're starting now on the task and finish groups and the external engagement. I'm picking up on the engagement. The report in front of you, where it gives the brief summary at the front, it refers to the members of the Place and Resources Overview Committee are given the opportunity to consider and make recommendations on the identified key issues, the proposed approach to engagement, and the key sectors and major project opportunities that can be considered within the strategy, and any other thoughts they have for the strategy production. The recommendation then goes on to refer to including the approach to consultation. Please can I ask that is changed or reads as including the approach to engagement, as the consultation has other legal implications for the council. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Yes, it's been a very thorough report. Thank you very much for everyone who's worked on that. As previously, the procedure is for people who are not members of this committee to indicate if they have any questions first. So is there anybody who's not a member of the committee who wishes to answer the questions? Okay. Councillor Somper first. Yeah.
Thank you. I think Councillor Simon Gibson was before me, although he may be on the committee, I don't know.
Thanks, Jane. I'm on the committee, so I'll wait.
Oh, okay, fine. Okay, fine. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the slide presentation. And I've read through the report and I read through it previously as well. I think for me, and I know others will have their own areas of interest that they want to be speaking about, but there's something that's missing, and it is relates to the need to play to local distinctiveness and change perception around that, and that is around our enormous food and drink sector. There is an arm within Dorset Council, within what was the AONB, which is Dorset Food and Drink, which had played an important role in helping food manufacturing, food producers, food makers, food suppliers have their route to market. They did a very good job when they first set up. There were a couple of officers who were working on that, and they have are still doing some good work and holding various events. They had a very successful event at Athelhampton for a winter fair, but they could do so much more with additional resource. These producers who may well be starting out small, but they grow, and then they can export and they can expand and they can employ, and they require skilled people working within those areas. You've already touched on the land that would be required, and there is an issue around that, a big issue around that. There's not enough of those small units format, those food type manufacturers to go into, and I would really like to see an emphasis on that, particularly if you are looking around that distinctiveness and that Dorset flavour, as it were. And I know that Dorset Food and Drink were successful. I don't know what happened, if it had funding removed from it or what. And it started at pace and was loud and supported those producers who are very busy producing their cheese and their cakes and their cider and their wines and everything else. They don't have time to do the marketing and all that. And Dorset Food and Drink were very good at supporting in that area. I suspect it is a huge potential market for us. Now, it might not be defence or the other things that you've mentioned in this report, but I think it is very important, and I think it is absolutely about our Dorset flavour.
I'm happy to take a response on that, Chair, if that would help.
Yes, thank you.
So I very much agree with you, Councillor. It plays into Dorset's local distinctiveness. There's quite clearly a significant number of local businesses who are either starting out very small, looking for support, who would help play into this field, pardon the pun. But I think what we need to look at is how can we encourage them alongside other perhaps more significant developments that are of a scale that could change the nature of Dorset's economy. So that's what we're trying to do and aim for through this production of this strategy, is look to develop an environment where small startups can begin, can grow, can have a supportive environment, but equally look at the other end of the scale where we've got really significant employment opportunities that could generate thousands of jobs and could make significant differences. And that's going to be quite tricky, because we need to have a focused strategy that looks to engagement with government, engagement with investors, engagement with other partners, so that they can see a route to make investment within the county. The flip side of that is we need to look to engage with small businesses so that they can also see a route to support from the county and the council as well. So
I agree, Nick.
We'll have to look at it from both ends.
I agree, and having an arm that already exists within the council that's being underutilised is deeply frustrating. I can tell you, and I don't have to declare an interest because I don't sit on your committee, but my own business benefited enormously. It started from this big, teeny tiny, and is now much bigger, employs lots of people. Goods travel around the country every single day. It continues to grow. It also uses supplies of other manufacturers also within Dorset who are also continuing to grow. So it seeps out. And that's just one example, and there are others. And as we have this arm already sitting in Dorset Council hibernating, perhaps it could be an area, and I know you want to focus on these large things, but these things can be large if they get given that opportunity to do so. And let's wake up Dorset Food and Drink a little bit more and allow it to do the work that it so can do so well.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Really plenty to think about, certainly. Councillor John Andrews is next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Totally endorse what Councillor Sompers just said. Looking at the report, the graph that says we're on a decline, we have this low-paid sector, and we're always going to have a low-paid sector in Dorset. We've got a lot of hospitality, hoteliers, etc., etc. I think it's a mammoth task to turn that around, especially, and I don't know if you've got any data to back this up, and I might have missed it, but the ageing population in Dorset. I mean, in 25 years' time, we're going to have more retired people than we are working age people. And that is a real big worry. And I know Councillor Bartlett has been talking about that for a little while. It's just when we get to that point. So it's a bit more than what we're all saying here. It's how do we get the younger generation to stay in the county? So I know we're trying to do that, but that's just my point.
Thank you. I think I remember going to an exercise a year or two back, looking at this sort of thing, and one of the things that people felt really could make a difference to the local economy would be to have a university in this area. I mean, but I don't see any progress in that direction. Maybe something we can work on. Who's next? Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me okay? Hello?
Yes.
Yes, you can hear me. Yeah?
Yes.
So
okay.
We can hear you, but you're quite quiet. So if you...
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make three points, if I could, which I hope will bring about some debate with your committee. So the first one is in the report. There wasn't any mention of the local plan. The previous administration paused the local plan for the very reason that we were of a view that we would be delivering housing that wasn't the type of housing that we needed. This business about retaining young families within the county has been a real issue, a real problem. Often those young families, when they go to try and buy their houses, they're being outbid. It's almost like the gazumping period of the early 90s. There's more money going on the table from retirees that are coming into the county, and estate agents obviously are in the business of making the maximum profits they can. So house prices have escalated beyond belief in this county. So we need to, somewhere in the local plan, we need to be able to address that. So I think that's an issue that needs to be looked at. the other one is attracting businesses into the county. Unless we sort out the north, south, and east-west main artery highway links, we're never going to attract major businesses into this county, and this isn't going to happen overnight. And if you look at Devon all the way down to Cornwall, it's motorway and dual carriageway now. A lot of that was European money, but I travel on the side of the Devon Expressway to visit my daughter. Amazing road, and we just haven't got anything like that type of infrastructure in Dorset. Therefore, it's always going to be a struggle to attract major businesses into Dorset because the road system is so poor. And the next thing is the task and finish groups. And my views on this are well known within the council, I think. I don't believe there's a need for a political proportionality within those task and finish groups. They're not decision making. They're going to be advisory. And what we need, I've said it time and time again, is we need the best skills from the chamber, the best mindsets around that table to do that thinking. So that's the points I wanted to make, Chairman. I look forward to the debate with interest.
Thank you. Yes, I think I take your point about proportionality for this sort of a group. But the other points, if you'd like to comment on those?
Yes, Chair, I'm very happy to take those up. I think Councillor Bartlett is absolutely right about the need to align this plan with the local plan. We recognise that that will be an enabling document alongside other documents such as the housing strategy and the asset management plan. Those will all need to be a suite of documents that feed into our overall corporate plan. And I think from that perspective, that alignment between the economic growth strategy and the local plan is particularly pertinent and relevant in this situation. Unless we have sufficient allocations for both housing and employment, then we are going to struggle with accommodating local company growth and to find the skilled workforce that businesses are saying that they need. So I absolutely agree with Councillor Bartlett's point about that. I think the point about attracting business, I think again is very relevant. The communication links are not as we would probably want within the county. There are, however, areas of the county which do have relatively good communication links, and it's important to align those with the local plan and the allocations of employment land, so that you can put employment land and have company growth where there are better communication links. But I do agree with Councillor Bartlett that in general, physical communication is not great across the county. I think that leads to a point that comes back to Councillor Sumper's view about growing local businesses, because it is much easier to it's much easier to grow your own than to attract new companies into the area. If you've got companies already based within Dorset, growing them, getting to the next stage, making sure that they can grow and they've got sufficient space to grow within the county is a much better use of resources than trying to attract businesses that come into the county from outside. The exception to that would be some of the significant opportunities we believe exist around clean energy and clean growth that might come forward around Portland and the south of the county, where you have a definitive rationale for a particular project being brought forward in that locality and would generate significant inward investment, jobs and investment. So I think that's probably all I want to say in that, Chair, but I'd be very happy to obviously pick up any points I've made.
Yes, thank you for that. But personally, I have great reservations as well about bringing in large companies. I'm from a place called Sandwich in Kent, which had a huge development based on Pfizer's. It would become a huge source of income and brought in a lot of jobs into the area. But then the company changed its mind about moved its headquarters from Sandwich to somewhere on the continent. And because they become the dominant employer in that area, the local economy really then suffered when they moved out. And I think we've seen it time and time again with car manufacturing plants as well, where they set up, they do very well for a few years, provide jobs, but then the business goes into decline, they move somewhere else, and it has a big hit on the economy. And I think we're better off going for large numbers of small companies, small and medium companies, rather than trying to get one big one or two big companies who just won't necessarily work out well for us. The point about proportionality, I presume that's been suggested by Mr. Mayor. I may have to speak to him to see whether there's any flexibility on that, because I tend to agree that with Councillor Bartlett on this as well, that they don't need to be proportional at this level. It should be about working together for the good of our community. It's not a political matter. I quite understand why we have to do that on the larger committees, but for task and finish groups, I certainly don't see the need for it. So to take that on board. Okay, who's next? Yes, go on, Helen.
On the proportionality, it was our original intention that it would be interested councillors, so that you had the enthusiasm and the knowledge. When this was raised at the members' briefing, following that, one of the councillors asked Jonathan Mayor for it to be to consider it being proportionality, which is where the instructions have come back from.
Thank you. I'll follow that up with Jonathan and see if there's any flexibility that can be done there. Okay, next question. Okay. Okay. Yeah, we're now moving on to the members of the committee. Councillor Gibson is first.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Sorry not to be with you in person. It wasn't for a lack of trying. It was an hour into my journey that I'd abandoned it and turned back around to Verwood. I was coming in because I wanted to speak about this paper. I previously had the privilege of working with the team who I respect tremendously and I'm very, very fond of. But I fear that won't be reflected in the comments that I'll be saying to the committee today. Before I get into the main bulk of what it is that I want to say, Chairman, I've got a question. Given that this went to Cabinet before it went to overview, and there's been about a month since, I've looked at the two papers and compared them like to like. I'd be interested to know what's changed.
I'm very happy to take that, Chair. So there is very little difference between the two papers, Councillor Gibson. I think what we were looking for was an early engagement from overview in the process. I think that was raised at Cabinet, that there was a request to have that early input. And so I think from our perspective, we're reacting back to that as a request and looking to get genuinely the views of overview into what should the strategy focus on, how are we looking to engage, is it the right type of engagement that's taking place, and again, I guess, to find out the committee's views on the overall approach we're proposing to take. So you're right, there's not a lot of difference between the two reports, but what we're trying to do is obviously have that early discussion with overview to get your views.
Okay, thank you very much, Nick, and thank you, Chairman. This report is actually smaller than the one that went to Cabinet, albeit I appreciate that the Cabinet report had some of the LEP implications attached to it. I'm finding it very, very hard to productively participate in it because it doesn't say anything. It's reasonably decent at identifying the current landscape of the Dorset economy. It identifies some of the challenges that we face, all of which were agreed at Cabinet, all of which were agreed at in the members' webinar. I feel that we've made no progress in the month since it's come. In the webinar, the idea of task and finish groups was raised, and I suppose to try and offer some critique. I support that. But again, that was a month ago. No terms of references. We've only got the broadest of headlines about what they are. So it's quite hard to know even which ones you'd want to engage on at this point. I did ask for a potential fifth task and finish group at the webinar. I don't see that that's been taken up. So I don't know if it's been folded into one of the other four. But again, I don't feel like I've got anything new that I can constructively say from what we've had the opportunity to say in the past. The only thing I will negatively say, and I'm sorry that it is negatively say, is where we have had more information fleshed out from the Cabinet report is 1.22 in the report, where it talks about the face-to-face engagements. I'm pleased in one way to see that face-to-face engagements with our businesses are taking place. That is sensible to me. But it's the same places that always get engaged with. This isn't an economic development team's issue. This is the Dorset Council issue. The same towns getting spoken to the same way every time, and those of us that aren't in those towns getting left out. We're speaking to the towns that have the more established business infrastructure. We're speaking to the towns that actually have some of the stronger businesses in the area. If you're in a place like mine in Verwood, which has got a struggling high street, if you can even call it that, once again, we're going to be left with an online form. So if I've got an ask, it would be that actually you turn away from those areas that have got established business representation and actually look to the areas, especially the rural areas, where they currently don't have of any such things. So you, from my perspective, you'll either need to do more engagement or try and rebalance it differently. I'm sorry to be a bit grumpy. I suspect a 2-hour travel in the snow hasn't helped, but as it stands, I really had hoped to see better.
Okay.
I'm happy to pick up on that, Chair, if you'd like. I take the point about consultation, or sorry, engagement, because we can't call it consultation, but I do take the point about engagement, and there's always a balance between having locations that are spread around the county with the spread of resources that we've got. So we can have a look at how we might revisit some of that engagement and how we might want to do it so that we do try and get a more equitable kind of geographical coverage. That has to be weighed against the deployment of resources to help us in the understanding of how those sessions might benefit and lead to greater feedback into the report and into the kind of the evidence base of the report. So I can give Councillor Gibson some assurances that we will have a look at that and see whether or not we can better align that balance between the two.
Does anybody else want to comment on that? No? Okay. Councillor Gibson, you're probably not going to be overwhelmed by that response, but I mean, I think hopefully we can make more progress in the future. Who's next? Yes, Councillor Sherry Jesperson next, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Sherry Jesperson, Hillthorpes and Upper Clarence Ward. First of all, I'd just like to make a point of semantics that it's very important. In the early part of this presentation, reference was made to agricultural jobs as low skilled. Agricultural jobs are low paid, but they're not low skilled. And I don't think it's helpful to use language like that for such an important part of our economy. If you think what farmers do now with their high-tech 5G projects and so on, agriculture the same. So please don't call agricultural jobs low skilled. To get on to the point the reservations I have, so it's a good report, thank you, but I just have a really profound reservation about it. And it's been touched on already, because experience has shown, hasn't it, over many years and over many parts of the country, that an economic strategy that is predicated on attracting brand new, high skilled, high profile employers into an area, it can work, but it's very, very high risk, because if those sectors fail, if those businesses fail, all of those jobs go with it. And so as an employment strategy, I think I'm not confident that is good enough to base our whole employment strategy around that. It's got a part to play. You referred in your response, Nick, to what you called growing our own, but I don't see this reflected in this report. Indeed, in your paragraph 1.5, you said that the strategy should consider how we move the county economy away from fairly traditional industries such as agricultural, retail, hospitality and leisure and care services to an economy built on more other technology-based operations. I just think that's misguided. I don't think we should be moving from the traditional industries to the new one. We should be adding the new high profile industries with the high paid jobs in, but that's not the same thing as moving away from the thing that the industries that we currently thrive on. So it's a semantic point, but I think it's really important. I wouldn't advocate a move away from one into another. It's adding new ones in. And because I think the Dorset economy, small and micro businesses are the backbone of the Dorset economy, and they always will be. And what I don't see in this economic strategy is the focus on all the things that we need to do to remove the barriers from these small and medium-sized and the micro businesses that Councillor Somper referred to, that go on to thrive and make employment and indeed make good money. We need to they are our distinctive businesses. We've got barriers such as have been referred to, transport links, but also the housing, the employment sites and the employment units that these businesses need. The power grid, we have the North Dorset employment sites in outside Sturmston Newton. Since this was my portfolio back in the North Dorset District Council days, we have employers, small to medium employers that would like to move on to that site, but they can't because there's no electricity provision there. We also the provision for moving to digital, that can be a barrier to small and medium enterprises. So that's what you put in this report is fine. It's what's not here. I would like to see much more emphasis and much more confidence in our existing businesses, the businesses that Dorset actually already has and that lend themselves very well to Dorset, the businesses that are our distinctive characteristic, and to be doing everything we can to build those rather than relying entirely on bringing in new high-profile, high-paid businesses, because I have to say I think that's a high-risk strategy, and generally speaking, it doesn't have a very good success record and hasn't done for the last 40 or 50 years as an economic strategy. Picking winners is very high risk. So that would be my main comment on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Nick, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, yeah, certainly. I think so. That kind of feedback is exactly the type of feedback that we're hoping to get from the committee today. Some of the things that committee members believe that should be within the reports, within the strategy. Some of the barriers that committee members believe could be addressed or could be overcome to help encourage economic growth. So I think that feedback has been very useful from that perspective. I think I do absolutely take the point about semantics, about adding new sectors. That's probably a bit of terminology within the report, but I absolutely agree with you. This is about adding new sectors rather than replacing current sectors. But I do think there is something about how can we introduce new technology into those more traditional sectors to make them more productive. So can we look to replace and maybe address some of the skills issues? Can we look to replace people who are or posts or jobs within some of the traditional businesses through the use of automation or data or other kinds of new technology. So you bring up those more traditional industries that we've got a lot of through the use of new technology. And as you mentioned, farmers are obviously already doing that with the use of new machinery, new technology, cloud computing, and the like to help them. So the trick there is, how do we get that embedded across some of our more traditional sectors? I do absolutely take the point that SMEs and small and micro businesses are the bedrock of the Dorset economy. If you look at our industrial makeup, the size of our companies, the vast proportion of jobs of businesses are within those micro enterprises and SMEs. We will obviously have to do something to support them and to create an environment within which those businesses can succeed and can thrive and remove the barriers to growth. I also take the point about the fact that picking winners in terms of inward investment is very difficult, and you wouldn't want to put you wouldn't over resource, or you wouldn't want to pin all your hopes on trying to attract new businesses into the county. As I've previously mentioned, it's much better to grow your own. They're already here, they're already captured. I suppose I would caveat though by saying we've come back to our growth point here, that the Dorset economy has grown only by 6% over that period. So we do need to change something fundamentally within those micro and SME businesses to enable them to grow. And as I come back to within the report, are there major opportunities, particularly around the South Dorset economy or the area, that would help generate significant numbers of employment in particular industries, and that could make a step change in how the Dorset economy is viewed? So combining the two of those within a strategy is probably where we're going to have to get to, and as I said previously, can be quite tricky, but would have to accommodate both to ensure that we do have a quite wide level of support and foster that kind of supportive environment, as well as looking to major opportunities that could significantly change the overall economic makeup.
Yes, thank you. You're absolutely right. It's both, not either or. We need to focus on the employment we've got as well, and take away all of those barriers. And you're absolutely right. Upskilling people, which brings me to my kind of second, which is really a general question that goes with the point that the chairman made earlier about our university. There's no university in Dorset, but there is a university in Bournemouth. We've spoken about improving relations with higher education. As I say, ever since we were having this conversation back when I was doing this portfolio in North Dorset, but we've not made a lot of progress. In fact, if anything, those relations, the support from the higher education sector has diminished for various reasons. Why is it that having Bournemouth University really only a matter of miles away, it's only just across the border, but why do we not get the benefit from that than, say, Exeter gets from its university? I've never quite understood why we're so poorly served in that regard. Do you have a feel for why that is, and if there's anything as part of this strategy we can do about that?
I don't have a feel at this stage as to why we don't get the kind of the bleed of students and startup businesses from the universities within Bournemouth. But I absolutely do understand that we ought to be making most, particularly towards the east of the county, with those linkages. It's not a significant stretch of the imagination to assume that students who have been located at Bournemouth may be interested in remaining within the general locality, and that would include areas within the south, within the East Dorset geography. So I suppose there is a question about how do we make better linkages with universities, and how do we start to encourage them to look at Dorset as a place where they might want to do outreach courses? Are there locations where actually we can offer them connections in with businesses that help their either research and development or their academic teaching? So a good example might be Winthrop and what we're trying to do there in terms of making that a kind of a bit, the enterprise zone and a bit of a sector for defence and security. Are there Are there linkages there? Is there, could a presence from one of the universities be accommodated there? I mean, we'd absolutely encourage that. So there are absolutely things in which we could do to encourage universities to have that greater presence, and to begin things like startup courses and the like within particularly that kind of east and south of the county.
Yes, thank you. Because we tried all this a good number of years ago, but it wasn't very successful because Dorset didn't have a great deal to offer the universities. But I think we probably have more to offer the universities now. So it was all ask from Dorset rather than a partnership. And I hope that now we will have more to offer. So yes, more power to your elbow with that discussion with Bournemouth University, because it seemed to me it's absolutely, it could make such a lot of difference to how this pans out over the coming years. So thank you.
Yes, I think you made some really excellent points there. It strikes me that if you look at the hourglass population diagram, it does show how much we're losing people after university. And one way of offsetting that would be to bring other people from other parts of the country here, rather than just us losing people from also to the big cities, but have a bit of a pull back in the opposite direction and finding ways to actually get people to come here. Okay, is there anybody else? No, okay, then David Taylor is next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for an interesting report. I'd like to congratulate Sherry Jefferson actually on some of the comments that she's been saying there, because yeah, it was high on my agenda. Was particularly one of them was the low skill reporting on various sectors of the retail, catering, etc. That we are not low skilled. I've been a retail catering manager for the last 25 years, so I understand how hard it is to get good skilled staff in the sector. So that needs reviewing. Secondly, the fact is, like, I understand the questions going to the chambers across Dorset Chamber. I really feel as though these type of questions should be asked from community-led schools, colleges, people on the ground that actually understand what it's going to be out there to get in work or actually implement work. So that's one of the keys there I wanted to address. Thirdly, the sector that we often take a white elephant to and ignore it in the room is the fact we have a very big sector of healthcare across the county. Now, we've looked at the reduction age of retirement. Healthcare is retired between 55 and 60. That is absolutely across the board. My other half is retiring this year, and my sister retired last year. So therefore, we've got a sector there which we're losing out of making sure engaging to our community to actually implement, to offer a nice retail environment too, and a service sector. So that's probably not up to look there. So therefore, there's lots of questions in there which I wonder if we'd actually looking at. Sherry's always intimate about the universities. We've got Kingston Ward College up there, which has now gone forward with Weymouth College. There should be a recognised area we could actually improve on delivering to the sector of study here. And finally, as the old World War adage used to go, make, do and mend. I think that's what we should do with Dorset. Let's fix it, shall we? Because I think we can. And yeah, put me up for the group. Thank you very much.
Nick, did you want to say anything?
Yes, I do. Again, I take the point about engagement and how we might look to engage much wider on some of this. I think we have opened up the opportunities. So the electronic opportunity as a questionnaire isn't restricted to businesses. It will be open to anybody. I do take the point that the most favourable way of engaging with people would be face-to-face and having workshop sessions. But again, I come back to the point about resourcing and timescales for some of that. We will look to review that and understand how we might be better placed to undertake some of that. But I do come back to the point about resources. I think that, yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Starr.
Thank you, Chair. Of course, one of the problems of being a long list of people asking questions is someone's bound to have brought your subject up already, and Councillor Jesperson really did, in that the most depressing thing about your presentation was the fact that we seem to be performing so badly compared to Devon, which is not a dissimilar county in many ways. They're a long way from London, further from us, and they've got an ageing population just like us, possibly not as high as ours. But yet, one of the reasons you said that they are doing well is because they've got a university. But yes, Bournemouth University is geographically in Dorset. It is surprising that we don't seem to be benefiting more from that, because as I recall from the Dorset plan, the actual figures we're talking about here are quite huge, aren't they? If our productivity came up to national average, it would be fantastic. But I noticed you said that productivity in South West is 35% and that the UK is 43%. How are we, how does Dorset compare to that?
So
Dorset 6%. 6%. Yeah, the growth.
Yeah, well, there must be room for improvement there, and yeah, it's the university that really sticks out in my mind. That we should have more benefit from a university which is just down the road. Thank you.
I can supplement that response if you'd like, Chair.
Yes.
So, the point about Devon as a comparator, I think the slide that Helen shared showed different locations within Devon. So the place that we would ideally like to be is Exeter, because Exeter has got a strong demand for skills and a good level of supply. So if you look at an area which is got a low demand for skills and a low supply, that's the kind of Torbay area, which is, so obviously Devon has got different areas within the county which have got very different economic makeups, and I'm pretty sure if we'd applied the same logic across Dorset, you'd have a similar kind of result. Exeter obviously benefits from the motorway links, the international airport, the university, things like the Met Office and other kind of areas. What if we were looking to apply this across Dorset? There's quite clearly an opportunity around some of the large industries, the universities, the critical mass that's prevalent within Bournemouth and the conurbation. And the trick here is how do we encourage that to bleed into areas of Dorset so that we get the benefits from the higher skilled, the students, the better communication links over towards that part of the county? How do we get that coming across Dorset so that we get a better range or a wider range of benefits from a geographical perspective? So that's something we'll have to have a look at in terms of how do we improve linkages with the universities and engagements with the universities, but also some of the bigger businesses that potentially could look to have offshoots or supply chains within the Dorset economy as well.
Right, thank you very much. Probably need to put it all together now. I feel it's been a really good, positive discussion this morning. And I think that the members have come up with plenty of good ideas that hopefully Nick and his team can take on board going forwards. I think nobody objected to the time scale or the area you're working on. So I think we're probably happy with that. I would like to come back and say I think the task and finish groups should not be proportional. And I will make that view to Jonathan Mayer, because I think we need people who are motivated and interested in the subjects. And the party politics doesn't really come into it at this stage. So I think, yes, the idea that Councillor Jesperson and others have said come forward, and I'm sure it could be incorporated in your next levels. So I think that pretty much sums it up. So thank you all very much for that. Yes, best of luck with making it happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that leads us on to item 9, which is our work programme. I realise I probably should have done this at the beginning, but I'll do this now. Anthony, we now have a new Democratic Services Officer to help support the work of our committee. Anthony Nash, who's sitting in front of me, Did you want to say anything about what your role is, Anthony, or anything about the work plan going forward, if you've had a chance to look at it yet?
I guess my role is to facilitate these meetings and to get them happening in a way that allows us to make good and accurate recommendations and decisions to Cabinet and other areas. Our work programme looks quite busy for the January meeting, so it's whether we want to have a look at that and discuss one maybe moving towards informal working, but that's very much up to you.
Lindsay, did you want to comment on any of the work plan that you've helped to produce up till now and how it should go forward?
I don't think I really want to add anything. I think, as Anthony has just said, your January meeting has 4 items, and you've discussed 2 in quite a lot of detail today. So it's just whether or not you want to give any thought to how you might deal with those 4 items. But I don't think there's anything else that I would want to say. That's sort of for the committee to have a think about.
Do any of the members off online or in here have any views about the work plan and whether we should be changing it at all? Councillor Jesperson?
Mr. Chairman, I mean, just a general point. I mean, I don't mind having if we need to have a big meeting in January in order to cover the work, then let's have a big meeting if we plan it. What I don't want us to do is try and jam too many agenda items into one meeting and then not have the time. I would rather say, well, we're going to have a meeting that lasts 3/4 of a day and bring a packed lunch if that's what we have to do. But it does flag up my point, and you'll pardon me for saying this again, but I'm going to keep saying it until I feel satisfied. Is that the remit of the overview committee is really, really important. And if we're to do our job properly, then we need to have time to discuss these new policies in detail. But we also need to be seeing these new policies far enough ahead of when they're going to Cabinet and Council for us to make a real impact. I mean, the fact that and Simon Gibson made this point, but the fact that we were seeing the economic strategy policy after it had already been to Cabinet, that's not how it's meant to work. We're meant to be having the early discussions, and if we don't get a handle on our work programme, we're always going to be discussing policy 2 weeks before it goes to Cabinet, and that's not getting the best out of this committee. That's not really how we're meant to work. So I would just put in a plea, could we, but by all means, if we have to have a big meeting, I'm perfectly willing to do that, but can we try and get some space into our work programme so that we can discuss things in the way that we're perfectly willing and able to do, as we have this morning, and that there's enough time between when we have our input for officers then to go back and take notice of that and put that into the report that then goes to the next stage, because that's the most effective way for this committee to work. Thank you.
Can I say I completely agree with what you're saying there, and I think that we can get on top of it. There is a very large workload because there's a heck of a lot of things going on, and we do need to have a say in those matters. But yes, I think you're right. We need to get ahead of the game and not just be catching up with things all the time. And I suspect that one of the big things we'll be doing next year is the draft transport plan, version 4, I think we're at, or something like that, which I think is going to influence a heck of a lot of policy areas across the whole council area and our relationship with BCP and other things as well. And you're right, I certainly want us to be leading that review and leading that way forward, and rather than responding after the event. Sorry, if you wanted to come back on that.
Only just to say, Mr. Chairman, that again, with the transport review and indeed the transformation joint overview committee, as we're working at the moment, there's no possibility of us doing what the overview committee is meant to have the option to go away and set up little working groups that will look at particular aspects of policy. Again, because of our tight timetable, we have not the option to do that. And I did raise at Cabinet, as you know, yesterday or whenever, was it only yesterday? The fact that when we come to look at the joint working, the joint overview committee to look at the transformation work, that's going to be a really big, that's a big responsibility on the overview committee to look at that. And I do think we need to give, to understand that we need to give ourselves time, not just time as in the length of time we spend on it, but again, the gap of time between when we see it and when it goes to its next stage. Because if we want to do for either the transport, the local plan might be another one where if we end up, we might not see the local plan because that has its own EAP. But if that were to come to us, we might want to go and look at a particular aspect of that that's particularly knotty. And with this current way of working, we've denied ourselves that opportunity, and that's what the previous overview committee did. It set up little working groups to come back 6 weeks later with the report when something was particularly knotty. So I'm sorry to bang on. I'll be quiet now.
No, you're entitled to your views, and you're entitled to express them freely, and we're all happy to do that. So thank you very much. We'll take that on board, and we'll get back to you again. Let's look at these in detail. Right, the items 10 and 11, urgent items and exempt business, we have neither of those. So that's the end of our meeting. Thank you very much. We can now go offline. And I hope you all get home safely.